are called Jaina. Okay, so this is in a way a small kind of an overview of the religion. Now when it comes to the teachers, okay, how many teachers we said have been there? 24, right? So the first of them was Rasapadeva, and the last one was Vardhamana, or as we know him, Vardhaman Mahavir. Now, Vardhamana is also known as Mahavira, which means the great hero. Okay, so when we speak about Mahavira, one thing what we know is that he is said to have lived in the 6th century BC. Any great personality who also lived during that time, who we are aware of? Okay, he is said to be a contemporary of Gautam Buddha. And he is the successor of Parvanatha, who lived in 9th century BC. So now when we look at Jainism, it also would have had a great deal of contribution to the Indian culture, to the Indian society. So last time when we were studying about Buddhism, we see that through the teachings, through the principles, a lot to the world. Next year when you all have the course on philosophy of education, there also you will see how the Buddhist system of education, contributed a lot to the learning process. Similarly also did the method or the model proposed by Jainism. So in this way we see that these religions had a lot to offer to the world. Now, especially when it came to Indian culture, when it came to spirituality and philosophy, these are the two things that we will look into this course, trying to see the spirituality little bit and also the philosophy of Jainism. Now, Jainism is also considered as a Sramanic religion. And what does this mean? This means that it in a way belongs to a group of ancient religious movements that in a way emphasize self-discipline, asceticism and renunciation. So we see that the word Sramanik comes from the root word Sramana, which is a Sanskrit word. And what does this mean? It means, any idea? To exert or to labor or to work. And it basically reflects the intense efforts that those who are practicing it make in order to achieve their goal. Okay? And what is the goal over here? The goal is spiritual liberation. Now we see that these Sramanic traditions, including Jainism, also have a certain few characteristics which are needed to know. Okay, so let's take a look at a few of them.
The Shravana from what is Shravana?
So, first and foremost, Sramanic refers to that whole group of this thing where people practice asceticism and all. The root word is this, which means to work, exert, labor. So, in order to achieve the goal. And what is the goal here? Spiritual liberation.
Is it a religion within a religion?
No, it is a, yeah, in the sense, for example, when we, a group of religions like, so for example, all religions which have these practices of asceticism, self-discipline, etc., okay, would come under that category. It is a broad umbrella which includes all the other religions. Or when we have kind of Judeo-Christian or the Christianity, all the other things, Judaism, how we would put them together under one umbrella, like, so in this way, Shramanic is a name for that. So now what are the few characteristics? First and foremost, we see that they follow ascetic practices. And what does this include? This will include self-discipline, rigorous self-discipline, which also would include fasting, celibacy, also many forms of self-denial, and all this is done in order to purify the soul so that it can progress towards liberation. Another characteristic or key feature of these Shramanic religions is the emphasis on non-violence. Okay, and we see that central to Jainism is this whole principle of non-violence in thought, word, and deed. Okay, another key feature is rejection of Vedic authority. So they reject the Vedic authority and they rely on their own scriptures and traditions. So the teachings that have been passed down from the teachers, okay, the rules that they have come up with, so they rely on their own traditions rather than following the authority of the sacred texts of the Veda. So another feature is karma and rebirth. As we have seen, actions and their consequences lead to karma, which in a way lead to the whole cycle of birth and rebirth. And another feature also is the goal to attain liberation from the cycle of birth, rebirth, and achieving a state of eternal bliss. Okay, so these are some of the key features that we find across these Shramanic religions.
When they talk about eternal bliss, what does it mean? If they think that they have like paradise or heaven, or what does it mean by eternal bliss?
Okay, so when we look at eternal bliss, one of the ways of looking at it is that when you are completely liberated, in a way you are not affected by any of these small worldly things that affect you. Now, in our understanding, our mind directly goes to paradise because we have learned that, or we have been kind of brought up in that faith. Okay, but we see that bliss in general can refer to anything which doesn't disturb you. So in a tranquil, peaceful, calm state. Okay, so ultimately we see that when you are liberated, okay, you are not affected by anything, that worldly thing which is there. Okay, so eternal bliss would refer to that. When we look at the whole philosophy of it, we'll get to understand a bit more of this.
So for them, there is no rebirth anymore once they achieve that liberation.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that whole listing. Okay. So let's take a look at the origin. So now, as we have already said, asceticism, mysticism, meditation, contemplation, silence, solitude, okay, practicing non-virtue renunciation, all these are distinguished characteristics of Shramanic religions. Now, we see that Jainism was in a way instrumental in bringing a radical change in the lives of many Indians. Okay, so let's take a look at the origin and development. So, it originated in the 6th century BC, and it was this time that many people were opposing the hierarchical organization and the formalized ritualism of the Vedic religions. So can we try to figure out why do you think people were opposing this hierarchical organization or this ritualism that was there in the Vedic religions? Okay, caste is one. Then okay, caste, then ritualism, yes.
Because of like Sanskrit, well, like Brahminism in Sanskrit, so they
Huh.
wanted to come out of it. Social evils.
Okay, yeah, social evils, that also we can include. Okay, then elaborate a little bit.
I mean, they only want their caste people to come.
Okay. So basically, we see that even when you look at Judaism and Christianity, right? What we see that when there are many things imposed on the people, life tends to become difficult. When there are too many laws, when there are too many strict, rigid structures, life becomes difficult, and it becomes more difficult when people don't understand why they are doing certain things. Same thing can be applied here. First and foremost, we see that there was this rigid social hierarchy. So we see that okay, the caste system, the Varna system, we can include over here, and we see that this, as we all know, classified people into distinct social classes, and these had certain prescribed roles plus duties. And therefore, the privileged ones in this whole hierarchy were the Brahmins. Okay, why? Because they also had control over religious knowledge and rituals. So as a result of this, those who were in the lower strata of society, okay, they basically began to feel oppressed by this system, that they were not given opportunities, no access to knowledge, okay, and as a result of it, they looked for alternatives in order to find some kind of spiritual meaning in life and some kind of fulfillment. Okay, so this is one of the reason. Next, we see that complex rituals. So we see that the Vedic rituals which were there were time consuming, they were elaborate, and they were also quite expensive. Huh? Elaborate means there were many, it was complex, and then so many small things. I'll come to that. Okay, so time consuming, elaborate, expensive, and also it required multiple priests and performance of very intricate ceremonies. Now we see that these rituals were in a way not accessible to the general population, especially those who are not belonging to the Brahmin class. And therefore, since this was the ones who could perform it, since there were only a few, it was restricted only to a few. That also led to a kind of a strong dissatisfaction among those who were at the marginalized or at the lower strata of the society. And as a result of it, they could not fully participate in religious life. Now let's move to our Christian faith. Okay, and let's try to do a comparison. In Judaism, okay, how many commandments were there? You had 10 commandments, and then how many were they broken up into? There were some 600 odd small rules, rituals which people had to follow. Then we see that the scribes and the Pharisees in a way would impose these on the people. As a result, what happened? So people first and foremost did not understand what was happening, why it was happening. Secondly, we see that it also was don't do this, don't do that. So many of these do's and don'ts were there. Even for small practices, there were quite complex things, okay, which was not in a way easily understandable. Secondly, you also had certain things which only the priest or the scribes, the high priests, the Pharisees, they had access to. And as a result of it, the people were just like there in order to, they could get anything only through them. So they were like the mediators. Same thing also happens over here. So since you have only a few who can do the rituals, only the few who have access to the knowledge, as a result of it, we see that others are told to do, you have to do to get salvation. Otherwise, there is no way out. So they don't understand, and that is in a way which also leads to a bit of dissatisfaction and discontent. Now, next was personal religious experience. So now we see that all have an inclination to get this personal religious experience. All want to have an experience of the divine in some way or the other. So we see that rather than relying on the intermediaries, okay, rather than relying on people who are they mediating between you and God, people wanted to get a kind of a direct access. Because over the course of time, what happens when there are mediators? What is one of the shortcomings when there are mediators? Okay, can we put some other word for it? See, when there are mediators, so for example now, okay, one is in a way control is there. Okay, the whole question of dependency. So we see that, in short, when there is control, when there is power in the hands of a few, they can dictate rules, they can also make changes as and when they want. And what happens is, because of this, the others feel oppressed. Because it is not that they cannot do it or they are not capable of doing it, but because of the system, they are not allowed to do it. Okay, so we see that if the mediators were not there, these people could have direct access towards the divine. But because you have the mediators in between, they have to go only through them. And then we also see that there were certain social changes that were happening during that time. So we had urbanization, people moving to cities, and also because of this, there was interaction between people. When people meet, they begin to talk, there is a sharing of issues, sharing of problems, and this leads to exchange of ideas. Uh, yeah, no, can you be more specific? Ah. Yeah. See, I would say, okay, confession you could include in that, but then also, see, for example, mass would be a better example. Okay, confession, yes, sacraments also. You see that if everybody could do it, there would be a direct access, right? Why go through somebody else? Okay, so yes, in that way we can distinguish. Spiritual direction becomes a completely different issue. Why? Because it is not more about taking you to God, but helping you discover yourself. So the whole goal is different there. So that would be a different issue. Yeah, so we see that these kind of hierarchical structures which were there, this formalized ritualism created a sense of meaningless or a sense of dissatisfaction in the people. Then we also see that there was the failure of the Vedic religions to meet the popular needs. So we see that the needs of the people were not met because they had to do something which they felt was not exactly what they were wanting. They wanted something, but they were getting something else. Apart from that, we also see that they had to do a number of sacrifices which did not provide release from samsara, which did not provide release from this whole cycle of birth and death. At the same time, we see that this sacrificing animals and the merciless killing of animals, which was done in these sacrificial rituals, this forced the Jinas at that time to provide people with a new orientation and a new interpretation. So as we can see in most of the history of the world, there has to be something which is not going right. Then somebody comes in order to set it properly, in order to liberate the people. The Jinas could have had a similar role. There was a lot of dissatisfaction, people's needs were not being met, therefore they decided to give a new orientation to the people. So the Jinas wanted to give a new interpretation, and we see that what they did was, in their teachings, they gave emphasis on personal training. They said that salvation is attainable to all. Okay, not like the earlier times, there only a few could be saved. All can be saved, provided that people were willing to learn how to achieve it. Okay, so you had to learn the ways to achieve it, plus also you had to put your personal effort. So therefore, personal effort and practice became a very important feature rather than just theories, speculations, and we see that the proof of the validity of this was basically found in personal experience, okay, rather than some kind of textual authority or logical argument. Now what does this mean? So first and foremost, we see that these ones who thought that salvation was attainable if one was willing to learn, if one was willing to follow the teachings, these teachers were the ones who had practiced, who had tried the method, and it had led them to liberation. So therefore, here you are learning from somebody who has already achieved that goal, rather than from just reading something from scripture where you are not sure whether you may or may not achieve it. This was backed by personal experience. There was enough proof. And that is why we see that the people were inclined towards this. Okay, so we'll stop for today here. Tomorrow we'll continue with the development of Jainism and a little bit about the founder. So first and foremost, we see that what was the reason behind a kind of a feeling of discontent among the people? Complex rituals we saw. Then also you had rigid structure. So there was the rigid structure, hierarchy was there, and as a result of it, the Jinas wanted to provide the people with a new orientation, to give them a new meaning in life. Okay, we see that there was a lot of emphasis on personal training, and therefore salvation was something that could be attained if a particular individual was willing to learn. So today let us take a look at the belief system. So when we look at the belief system, we see that the Jainas hold that the Jaina religion is eternal. Now, what do we mean when we say that the religion is eternal? Any idea? When we say religion is eternal? Okay, so in a way what they say is that it has been revealed repeatedly through different periods. Okay, in a way revealed again and again. And this has happened through different teachers or Tirthankaras. So therefore the Jainas believe that their co-principles, okay, that their co-principles such as non-violence, truth, then non-stealing, chastity, and non-possessiveness these they believe are eternal truths. Okay, and therefore these principles are in a way considered to be unchanging, applicable at all times and at all places. And therefore we have also the role of the Tirthankaras. Okay, so these were the enlightened beings and they had attained knowledge of everything. Therefore, they were called omniscient. That means having knowledge of everything that is possible. Now we also see that they were considered perfect teachers. Who would go on to establish the community which was fourfold, which included monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women. Okay, we'll come to this a little bit later. Now, another important feature of this is cyclical time. So here they speak about two half cycles, that is ascending and the descending. No, this is just a kind of a feature of the religion. I mean, what it is about. Okay, so we see that when we speak about cyclical time, there are in each half cycle. Okay, so you have two half cycles, ascending and descending, and in each of these half cycles, there are 24 Tirthankaras who appear at various intervals to, in a way, revive and teach the Jaina religion. So, as we saw also in Buddhism, when there is an erosion of the teachings, when the teachings are not being followed, then you have again somebody who comes in order to bring the people on the right track. Same thing happens here. So, here they say in each of the half cycle. So this we will take a look a bit later in detail when we deal with this whole concept of the main aspects of religion. So as of now we see that when the values are eroded, you have the Tirthankaras appearing in order to revive and teach the Jaina teachings. Then also we see that when we speak about repeated revelation, so when we speak about repeated revelation, it is said that the Jaina texts in a way mention, as we saw yesterday, there were 23 Tirthankaras before Mahavira. Okay, and therefore each of these Tirthankaras' preachings or teachings is preserved and passed down through scriptures as well as oral traditions. Later on, we will be taking a look at their teachings and their scriptures. And therefore, we see that these teachings are believed to be rediscovered. So that means whenever each Tirthankara comes, he is not teaching anything new. Okay, it's just a rediscovery of the things already there and making it applicable to the context or to the situation. So, and therefore we see that in this way there is a kind of a continuous or a continuity that is being followed. So also we see that this is something to do with their belief. Now next, what is important to look is the founder. So first and foremost, when we look at the role of the Tirthankaras, we see that they reached the state of moksha or liberation at the time of their death. And this was as a result of personal effort. We'll come to that. This is just the initial introduction. We'll come to the deeper concepts later. So all your questions will be answered then. So then we also see that they are regarded as gods and worshipped by the Jainas. And the belief among the Jainas is that it is only on the authority of the Jinas or the Tirthankaras that one can have or one can attain clarity on certain spiritual methods. Okay, on certain spiritual matters, you can attain clarity only by following their teachings, only by, in a way, listening to what these have to say. Why? Because they have experienced it through their own effort. They have been able to attain the liberation. And therefore we see that the teachings and their lives itself, okay, so their life itself is a living testimony of how to attain liberation. Okay, so it is they themselves who show the possibility of reaching this liberation. Just as we have the whole concept of saints who by their lives show us the path, similarly here, by the teachings and by looking or reflecting on the lives of the Tirthankaras, you can see how you are able to attain liberation. Now it is said that before Mahavira, okay, you had Parvantha. Okay, so the 23rd Tirthankara, and we said he was the immediate predecessor of Mahavira. So Parvantha, and he is said to have preached the doctrine of love and ahimsa, okay, non-violence. And he is said to have had 4 vows, that is, not to destroy life, in other words, not to kill, not to have any violence, not to lie, that is truth, not to steal, and not to own property. And it is said that his successor, that is Mahavira, added the 5th vow of chastity. Okay, so now we can take a look at the life of the founder, Mahavira. So he was born, so first and foremost, he is the 24th Tirthankara, and so we see that he was born, or he lived during this time, 540 to 468 BC. He was born in a royal family, okay, in North India, in the town of Vaishali. So we see that his a little bit of info about the family. His father was Siddhartha Maharaja, who was the ruler of Kundapur, and mother was named Priyakarini. So at the age of 30, he left home. Okay, so now at home, who did he leave? He left his wife, he left his child, family, and he started to live a life of renunciation and asceticism. Okay, so we see that there are a lot of similarities with the Buddha also. Okay, and we know that in a way they were contemporaries. We'll come to that. When we start doing the teachings of it, we'll come to that. So let us go slowly. Otherwise, too much together, we'll be confused. Okay? So this is just in a way introducing the religion, introducing the founder. Then we'll go into the concepts deeper. Okay, so it is said that he passed. So for 12 years, okay, he led an ascetic life. So this included hard penances. And also it is said that whatever afflictions, whatever calamities, whatever difficulties, challenges that he faced, he was able to do that with a calm and undisturbed mind. And at the end of all this, he obtained omniscience. In other words, he got the knowledge of everything. Okay, and that is why he is called the victorious, the conqueror. Or also he is called the great hero. Okay, and all this is because in a way he was able to gain victory over the passions, over the worldly things which he was battling against. So we see that all these ascetic practices, these hard penances and facing things with an undisturbed mind, in a way helped him to obtain omniscience. And therefore you will see now in their lives there will be a lot of similarities, okay, between him and the Buddha. So it is said that he realized his true self with the rigorous austerities as well as penances. It is said that he also understood the nature of physical bondage. And also how we become slaves to our passions, how we become slaves to the attachments, how we become slaves to the worldly things. So by understanding the nature of bondage, we see that he was able to find ways to achieve total liberation. Okay, and this liberation included liberation from rebirth and bodily existence. And therefore he said that this ideal state of freedom, this state of liberation can be achieved only through a radical ascetic life. And if you again go back to what we learned in Buddhism, we see that initially also the Buddha started by having various rigorous practices, right? And when he decided, or when he realized that it was not helping him, he decided to stop them and continue. And what happened to the 5 ascetics who were following him? Okay, why did they abandon him? Okay, so because he had left these practices. So earlier also the belief was that one can attain liberation, one can free oneself from bondage only through these ascetic practices. Okay, and here also we see that the same thought is followed. Only through a radical life of penances, radical life of austerities, fasting, etc., only then can you gain mastery over yourself. Okay, otherwise you become in a way dependent on the body, a slave to the bodily needs. Here it is said that the essence, so in order to gain this freedom, you need total renunciation. Okay, and this renunciation is a total renunciation from bodily comforts as well as material objects. Okay, so in the words of Mahavira, he says, it is owing to attachment that a person commits violence, utters lies, commits theft, indulges in sex, and develops a yearning for unlimited hoardings. Okay, so if we again analyze this statement of his, so he says that it is because of our attachments that a person commits violence, utters lies, commits theft, indulges in sex, and develops a yearning for hoarding. That means having more and more. Now, if we look at this, do we find something similar to what we have already seen? Okay, suffering is one, but just today, in the beginning, we saw something, right? We looked at certain principles. Okay, so when we spoke about the core principles of the religion, is there some connection here? So, non-violence, then truth, then non-stealing, chastity, and non-possessiveness. So we see that all these principles in a way have come out of the experience, have come out of his realization that to gain liberation, first and foremost, you need to live an ascetic life, and an ascetic life that has complete or total renunciation. So we see that the modern day Jainas believe that this message, okay, or these words of the Mahavira are in a way very optimistic. That means they fill one with hope, It also leads one to be self-reliant, to be self-disciplined, self-purification, and also to develop the possibilities that one may have. So we see that in a way the teachings imply again the value of individual commitment, individual dedication. Why? Because we see that if you want to attain something for yourself, hard work is required, so you have to rely on yourself, discipline is necessary, and also you need to commit yourself to purification. Secondly, we see that there are n number of possibilities that are there for every individual. So ultimately, what we choose, what we become is as a result of our choices. So therefore, he also says that we need to carefully look at the choices and also develop whatever capabilities that we may have. Okay, rather than just focusing on one, develop the capabilities or the infinite potentialities of the human self. Okay, so when we look at his life, we see that he lived a life that was focused on non-violence and compassion. Now, throughout his life, he taught the 5 great vows which we have already looked, as well as he initiated many into his way of life. Okay, so in this way we see that now what are the 5 great vows and how can we classify them? Okay, so as we have already seen, the first one would be non-violence. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at them one by one again. So this in a way refers to, so by non-violence, what do you think is implied? Not killing, not hurting. Okay, so in a way, not causing harm to any living being. Okay, which includes humans, includes animals, includes insects, and also includes microorganisms. Now yesterday when I tried to ask you about your opinions, okay, some also said that they have the practice of sweeping before they go, right? So this is in relation to this, okay, because they are not supposed to cause harm to even any microorganism. Yeah, even mosquitoes. Okay, so no, not cause harm. So that means don't kill. You can in a way prevent. Okay, so therefore when the whole action of sweeping is to make sure that whatever is there, you brush it aside so that you don't cause it any harm by stamping or so. Okay, and therefore we see that they have to practice extreme gentleness. Okay, and special care for actions speech, as well as also thoughts. Because we see that it is not only our actions that can cause harm or suffering to people, also our words as well as also our thoughts. Okay, when we think bad of the others, some kind of a negative aura or negative energy is being passed on. Now, what is the second one we looked at? Second vow, truth. So, this in a way is pretty straightforward. So, this means in a way speaking the truth and avoiding falsehood in any form. Okay, so here also what one could include would be to be honest in whatever you do. Because even when you cheat somebody, in a way you are lying, in a way you are putting on a false perception or a false self to the other person. So therefore you are supposed to be honest in all dealings. You cannot be deceptive. You cannot take advantage of the other person. And also it also implies not being or not practicing exaggeration. Okay, sometimes we see that an incident may happen, but when we narrate it, we will lagao masala, add some own facts and say it. Okay, that's called exaggeration. So therefore, when truth is implied, means exactly avoiding any form of deception, any form of deceit and lying. Third, what was the third one? Non-stealing. And what can we imply from this? So first and foremost, reliance is one thing, being self-reliant. Secondly, not stealing in the literal sense, that is not robbing. Also what is included here is not taking something that is not willingly offered. If suppose somebody willingly gives it to you, fine. If it is not offered willingly, you don't take it. Okay, and therefore implications don't involve in theft, fraud or cheating. Also, so the Jainas are also expected to respect the property rights of others and avoid coveting others' possessions. Okay, does that sound familiar? Okay, so we see that. Next, what is the fourth one? Chastity. So basically, the vow of chastity, as all of you all know, is the practice of celibacy. So basically, practicing celibacy for the monks and nuns, and for those who are married, it would be fidelity. Fidelity to their own spouse also comes under this vow of chastity. So, in other words, monks and nuns are supposed to abstain themselves completely from sexual activity, whereas the lay people should live according to their vows that they take at the time of marriage, or they are being faithful to their spouses. And the last one is non-possessiveness. So this in a way refers to renouncing your attachment to material things. Okay, whether it is your material possessions, your material wealth, etc. And therefore, you are encouraged to live a life of simplicity as well as minimalism and also avoid greed and unnecessary accumulation. So this also implies in a way detachment, which is again twofold, from material as well as emotional possessions. So we shall wind up for today here. Next time we begin by looking at the order that he established, that is the fourfold order in the community, which included monks, nuns, laymen and laywomen. And then we'll take a look at the sacred scriptures which are there in Jainism. And when we look at that, we'll also look at certain doctrines where the question that you all raised today will be answered there. Okay, so thank you. When you look at the picture, what comes to your mind?
Jainism.
Okay, Jainism. Okay, so now what have we seen so far? No, in Jainism. Okay, when it comes to Jainism, what have we seen?
5 great house.
So we have seen the 5 vows. Anything else? Okay, ascetic life. Then non-violence, etc. Okay? And therefore, we have also seen something with regards to, okay, what does this picture try to tell us? Something about what we have already done. Something about what we have already done. Referring to Jainism. Okay, harmony with nature. Good. Harmony with nature as well as enlightenment, truth, non-violence. Good. So that means all of you all, in a way, have read something. So today we'll do this small exercise called as the Y chart. Now, how many of you all are familiar with what is a Y chart? You will have heard of pie chart? Yes. Okay. Line graph. Then the bars. Okay. So this is similar to that to represent some data. But what is the difference with this Y chart is that what we do is we take one particular topic and then we look at it from three different perspectives. So for example, the first is looks like. So when any topic is given to you, what does it look like? For example, this table, something to do with the visual. What does the table look like? Rectangle? Okay, it has 4 legs, etc. What does it sound like? Okay, it's hard. Okay, then how does it feel like? Very strong, heavy, etc. So in this way we see that we approach a particular topic from 3 different perspectives. First, how it appears to us visually, then how it sounds to us or what we have heard about it, and then what is our impression about it. So let's apply this to what so far we have learnt about Jainism. So in a way, what does it look like? When you have this whole aspect of Jainism now, we have just begun with it. We have learnt about Mahavira, we have learnt about the 5 vows. What comes to your mind immediately when you just glance at it? Okay, ascetic life. Can we say royal beginnings? Okay, also looks like detachment, peace, harmony, non-violence, okay, renunciation, okay, good. Okay, so in a way we see that royal beginnings, he was born in a royal family, okay, then also he lived as a householder for 30 years with a family, then he renounced everything, began to lead an ascetic life by renouncing all his worldly possessions, wearing simple clothes, etc., which indicates detachment. And then we also see that he also taught, right? So whatever knowledge he had was also taught to others. Now, how does it feel like? Okay, for example, when you look at renunciation, for example, what does it feel like? Sacrifice, okay. So like suppose for example, you have been studying very hard, okay, for your surprise test today, and then once the test is over, what feeling did you get? Relief, right? Okay, liberation. Okay, enlightenment. Okay, let's become a bit more serious. So, obviously, when we speak about, as we have said, it looks like renunciation. What does it feel like? Okay, it feels like a liberation, a kind of a giving up or a sacrifice, as you have said. Next, when you look at harmony, peace, what does it feel like? Keep this in mind, okay? keep the look what looks like in mind, and now go to the feeling level. What does it feel like? So when you look at harmony, when you look at bliss, good, inner joy, tranquility, good, so in a way we see that even in his life, we have already seen, in spite of all the difficulties, challenges, there was bliss, inner peace, calmness within him. Okay, at the same time, we see that once he attained liberation, in a way he was also omniscient, right? Knowing everything. Now, in a way, when we look at non-violence or peace, what feeling does it give us? Kind of an ethical living, right? Okay, so good. So you have seen the feeling part of it. Now, what does it sound like? What do others say about it? Okay, so now, what have you all heard so far? So far, you all have learned something. You all must have also heard from what others have been saying or have experienced something. So, how does it sound like? What does Jainism sound like for you all? Okay, ascetic life comes again. Can we say teachings of non-attachment? Okay, then also last class we read something, right? Okay, the 5 great vows. Which are they? You have non-violence, truth, non-possessiveness, okay. Now, what else does it sound like? When we look at, we have already seen Buddhism now, we are looking at Jainism. So, what have these great founders or great men done? After getting enlightenment, what they have done? They have shared their knowledge, or they have taught others. Okay, and this teaching has been by giving guidance as well as through sermons. Okay, and then we can also speak about compassion or compassionate leadership. Okay, that means inspiring followers to also have compassion and following non-violent principles in life. So this is in a way a kind of a summary. So keep this in mind. This will become a kind of a regular feature which will help us to also revise a bit better. Okay, so today we will begin by taking a look at the kind of community, or when we say that the Jaina community was structured in a fourfold manner. Okay, so let's take a look. First and foremost, we have monks, then you have the nuns or the religious women, then you have the lay men, and fourth you have the lay women. Okay, so the monks generally are referred to as sadhus, nuns as sadhvis, laymen as Shravakas, and lay women as Shravikas.
Did they give the word nuns or did they give the word sadhus and we added?
No, we have sort of tried to, for our understanding, we have used it. So monks, nuns, in that way, laymen, lay women. Okay, so now we need to have, we'll take a look at the roles of each as well as the practice and what was the goal finally. Okay, so when it comes to the monks, so first and foremost, they were male ascetics who had given up everything, renounced worldly attachments, and they were living a life of strict discipline. So what were the practices that they followed? Obviously, it was necessary for them to follow the 5 vows. Apart from this, they also had to engage in study as well as meditation. And they had to depend on the lay community for their basic needs. So the goal for them was, one was spiritual purity, and also liberation from birth and death. So this is basically with regards to the role that the monks or the sadhus had, what were their practices. That means they had to renounce worldly attachments, live a life of strict discipline, follow the 5 vows, okay, and also depend on the lay community for their basic needs such as food and shelter. And apart from that, the goal was spiritual purity and liberation. Now let's come to the sadhvis. So these are basically the female ascetics. Now they also renounced, okay, worldly attachments, and they also followed a path of strict spiritual discipline. That means vows included. So when it came to their life, we see that they lived an ascetic life, following the 5 vows. They focused on meditation, scriptural study, as well as they also taught. Once again, we see that they also had to depend on the lay community for their basic needs. So basically, if you look, the roles as well as the practices of both the sadhus and the sadhvis were in a way similar or same, you can say. And of course, the goal also was the same. You had spiritual purity and liberation. Then we have the lay men or the Shravakas, and these were the male householders So in a way, living in the world, managing worldly responsibilities. And now, what were the practice? They had to observe the vows to the extent that their circumstances in a way permitted. Okay, so for example, we see that they were less stricter in following the vows than the monks. Obviously, we see that when it came to the fifth vow, chastity applied to them also, but in what form? Fidelity. Okay, so there was no compromise with that, but with the other vows, for example, with regards to truth or this, we see that depending on the situation, they were not very strict in that observance. Now they participate in religious activities, and in a way they had to also provide for the monks and the nuns, or the sadhus and the sadhvis. So what was the goal? So the goal for them was to live a virtuous life as much as possible, then also support monastic community, and at the same time also in a way reduce karmic accumulation. That means through your good deeds you try to do away with all that you have accumulated. And in a way they also had the goal of progressing towards liberation. And then finally the Shravikas, well, we see that they had to adhere to the principles, Jaina principles, when they were fulfilling their social responsibility as well as their domestic responsibilities. So we see that they had to, in a way, also they had some religious activities, including fasting, pilgrimage, prayer, and also we see that they played an important role in upbringing children and helping the monastic community. So, supporting the monastic community was through alms as well as sometimes assistant, going out, helping out, etc. And the aim for them was similar to that of the Shravakas, that is, live a virtuous life, support the monastic community, and therefore make a path towards spiritual liberation. Okay, so this was in a gist the four-fold classification of the Jaina community. So next we can have a look at the interdependence and harmony. So when we look at this fourfold structure, one thing that comes, so what is something that comes to your mind? Now you have seen the fourfold structure, the four divisions in the society. What is it that comes to your mind? Okay, way of life, but more some specific. Yeah, so what does that show us? Collaboration, okay? Any other word for it? There is collaboration, then something to do with mutual support, right? So we see that there was a lot of interdependence. Okay, so that means the sadhus and the sadhvis would depend on the laymen and lay women for the basic needs, alms, etc. Whereas the lay men and women, they would in a way rely on the monks and the nuns for guidance, teaching, okay, spiritual advice, etc. So in a way there was this mutual support as well as a kind of a collaboration. Next, we also see that, is there anything else that comes to our mind when we look at this? We can speak of community cohesion. In a way, what this means is that this structure, the fourfold structure, ensures preservation plus propagation of Jaina principles. In a way, we see that each group contributes in its own way to the preservation as well as propagation of the religion or of the teachings. Okay, so with this being done, we can now focus our attention to the sacred scriptures. So before coming to this, it's important to realize that Mahavira passed the last 30 years of his life as an omniscient Tirthankara. Okay, so as an omniscient teacher, and he died at the age of around 72. And by the time of his death, it is said that there was a large group of people who had embraced this new faith. As we have already seen last time, because of the discontent that was there, okay, because this they wanted to in a way give people fulfillment in their lives, many began to join them. And the close disciples of Mahavira led the movement after his death. So after his death, these close disciples were the one who carried forward the teachings of Mahavira, and as a result of it, we see that Jainism now spreads from the northeast of India to the northwest and even to the south. So I think in Karnataka there is a considerable amount of Jaina community, right? Yes. So yes. So now we'll take a look at their sacred scriptures. Now we see that there are various, in a way, classification of sacred scriptures in Jainism. We see that each of the main sects which are there recognizes its own body of sacred scriptures. So now, can anyone tell which are the two sects that are there in Jainism? Okay, have the Shwetambaras and the Digambaras. So first we'll take a look at the main scriptures as follows. Then we'll see how these two sects differ in following the scripture. Okay. So now we see that each sect, followed its own kind of way of interpreting scripture. And most of the Jaina texts are written in Prakrita, which is an early form of Sanskrit. So now, according to the Jaina tradition, it is believed that the canon, okay, so the teachings that we have as of now is as a result of an agreement which took place around 1000 years after Mahavira's death. So it is said that there was a council that was held in Vallabhi, which is in Gujarat, current day Gujarat, and it was presided by a monk called Devradhi Samasramana, and his job or his duty was collecting and putting or arranging the sacred texts in written form. So you had a few texts here and there, you had the oral teachings. So it was his, in a way, purpose, his main purpose at this council was to put everything in written form. Okay, so when we speak about their sacred scriptures, we see that it has 6 sections and it contains either 45 or 46 books. So we'll come to that. So what we have to remember is that these 6 sections which are there, each one of them have their own significance, each one of them have their own speciality. So, if we take a look a little bit at this council, okay, that happened in Vallabhi, Gujarat, we see that this was a time when Jainism was beginning to establish itself a bit more firmly in the Indian subcontinent. Okay, and as a result, we see that there were also a lot of social, political, and also religious changes going on. And therefore, when there are such changes going on, you also need to adapt, you also need to get in line with the current trend. So therefore, we see that this council was very much important. And what was this purpose? Okay, we have said his purpose was collecting and putting the sacred texts in written form. But anyone can tell me why was it important to put everything in a written form? Okay, for reference, good. Can we speak about preservation? Okay. And also standardization, right? For example, if nothing is there in written form, each one can have his own interpretation. There is nothing to go and look. It's easy to manipulate. For example, if you do not have a particular rule book, each one can say, okay, I feel the rule is like that. But when everything is written, you can go back to it and you can then cross check. So therefore, this council was very important because of this reason. Okay, and also they wanted to make sure that there was a consistency as well as continuity. So this whole process in a way basically was putting, in simple words, it was converting the oral into written form. To understand in simple words, oral teachings were now converted into a written form. And this process, we see that could have introduced certain changes or certain biases because of the interpretations or decisions of the monks that were involved. And therefore, we see that this preservation of certain texts over the others reflects the importance or the priority. So that means everything may not have been put, certain things which they considered as important for the preservation, for the standardization, and for the continuity of the religion was given importance and put down. So also we can say now that one of the reasons also may have been to address certain issues in the community. So now in the scripture, do we have any texts which addresses current situations in the communities of those times? When you look at the Bible, okay, look at the New Testament, do we have anything where there is something written which has addressed certain problems which were happening during those days in some community? Okay, Acts is one. Then anything else? Okay, Old Testament also we have. But in the New Testament, if we want to narrow down our focus, we have Paul's letters, right? So the Pauline letters also address certain issues of certain communities. whether it be their non-moral way of going about or it being leading them to salvation. Okay, so in this way we see that this council had a lot of significance, especially when it comes to the sacred scriptures of the Jaina religion. So let's take a look at the outline. Okay, so we said that the canon was divided into 6. So first and foremost, we have the 12 angas or the limbs. Then you have the 12 upangas or secondary limbs or subdivisions. Then you have the painas or the scattered pieces. Then the 6 Shreya Sutras. Then you have individual texts and the 4 Mula Suttas. Okay, each of these we will deal in little bit of detail. So therefore each of these texts or each of these sections had its own specific purpose in the Jaina religion. We see that these are the canons. So first and foremost, when we look at the angas, okay, so as we said, the angas refer to the limbs in a way. If you want to put it in simple words, and these are mostly made up of sermons on various themes, whether they be on non-violence, whether they be on harmony, whether they be on peaceful living. And as we know, there is also a subsection of this which is called as the Upanga. But when we focus on this angas, the word anga basically means limbs, but also what has come out from the mouth of the Lord. In this case, Mahavira. And the content here we see is mainly dogmatic and mythological. And a great stress is given on the principle of ahimsa, that is non-violence. So now the general understanding is that after being omniscient, so after gaining knowledge, whatever Mahavira taught, okay, all this was in a way compiled by the Ganadharas in 12 parts. So basically when we speak about the Ganadharas, one thing we can say that these were the chief disciples of Mahavira. So it is said that Mahavira attained complete knowledge somewhere around the age of 42. After 12 and a half years of ascetic practice. So now we see that as an omniscient being, he somehow had complete knowledge about both temporal as well as the spiritual aspects, that is the worldly as well as the spiritual aspects. He had complete knowledge of the universe as such. So now these Ganadharas, okay, they were the ones who would listen to what Mahavira was telling them. They had to understand and in a way they had to pass it down to others. Also, they in a way systematized. Because we see that when in those days these great teachers thought, they may not have said, okay, today we'll deal with non-violence, okay, tomorrow we'll deal with harmony. These things would have come in between of their sermons. So therefore it was their duty to say that, okay, he spoke about this the other day, today he has spoken about this can be clubbed together. Okay, so when we are teaching to others, we teach it together. So in this way we see that they had a very big role to play. So it is said that he had 11 chief disciples. And among these 11, you had Indra, Buddhi, Gautama was the chief. So out of these 11, you had Indra, Buddhi, Gautama as the chief. So now, what are the Angas we have seen? Now we know that there are 12 parts or the 12 Angas. So what is that? We will deal on in the next class. Okay, so thank you. Can anyone, what do you all see in the picture? Okay, so some have said Bible. Okay, wood is seen. Anything else? Okay, so you have said Quran. Okay, in the first picture you have said the Bible. Now what do these exactly come under? Scripture, right? So today we'll take a look at the sacred scripture of Jainism. Now we see that in the last class we already looked at the outline, which included the 12 Angas or limbs. Then you had the Upa Angas, which were the secondary texts. Then you have some scattered pieces or just texts here and there. Then you have the 6 Shaya Sutras, a few individual texts, and the 4 Mula Suttas. Now, we will not take a look at all of these in detail, but we'll take a look at some which are significant in our study of Buddhism. So, first and foremost, when we look at the Angas, we see that it basically deals with the life of the monks. And these include sermons or speeches or talks which speak on a variety of themes, as we saw last time. But the most important is ahimsa. So the non-violent aspect is quite important in these Angas. Now, at the end of the class, there was a question of why the Anga only refers to as limb, right? So the understanding that is given to this is that because the limbs in a way are an important aspect, the angas are supposed to be an important aspect of the doctrine, and these angas in a way contribute to the complete understanding of Jainist philosophy and practice. Now when you look at a person, okay, we see that the limbs which are there, these contribute to the overall functionality of the body. Okay, so and therefore we see that similarly these 12 angas also, they cover topics that are necessary for a person to practice Jainism and understand the teaching. Also we see that there is no overlap. So each anga has a specific role, and therefore similar to the parts of the body. Therefore we see that each limb also has a specific function. Next we see that this use of the word limb can also be seen as symbolically to indicate the interdependence and the interconnectedness of the text. So just as the limbs work together to support the whole body, similarly these texts also support one another and they provide a body of knowledge that gives a comprehensive idea of the teachings. Now we see that we said that they cover a wide range of topics. Well, these would include ethics, philosophy, then you have cosmology, and right conduct. So how do you conduct yourself? So therefore we see that these 12 angas, and after this we'll have another 12 upangas, which are the secondary texts. Now we'll take a look at each of these angas and we'll see that these will have specific functions, in the sense they will be dealing with a specific section of the Jainist teachings of philosophy. So first is the Acharanga Sutra. So this basically will deal with the code of conduct for the monks and the nuns. Then you have the Sutra Kritanga Sutra, which will have certain philosophical discussions as well as refutation of heretical doctrines. So certain things which are not true, which are not this thing, it will also refute those heretical doctrines which may have come up. Then you have the Saranga Sutra, which deals with a variety of aspects concerning knowledge. We can also include, in other words, we can also speak about it as dealing with epistemology. Then you have the Samavayana Sutra, which will once again deal with the numerical as well as categorical classification of knowledge. Then the next is the Bhagavati Sutra, which contains again dialogues on topics such as cosmology and metaphysics. Then you have the Nata Dharmakatha Sutra, which has a few narratives as well as moral stories. Then the Upasakadasa Sutra will have, it will describe the 10 exemplary followers, okay, lay followers and their stories. Then you have the Antakradasa Sutra, which will describe stories of those who have attained liberation. Then you have the Anuttara Papakita Dasa Sutra, okay, which has stories in a way or narratives of souls that has achieved the highest heaven. Then you have the Prasnavya Karna Sutra, which again answers to questions concerning Jaina doctrine. Then you have the Vipaka Sutra, which has stories which illustrate the results or the consequences of karma. And then you have the Drishtivada Sutra, which also discusses various doctrines and viewpoints. Now, this is considered to be lost. Now, we see that these 12 angas are quite important for the Shvetambara tradition, whereas we sect doesn't recognize these 12 angas. So we see that the Shvetambara tradition or the Shvetambara sect, okay, it considers these 12 angas as the most authoritative texts. And these texts form the core of their scriptural canon. That means it forms an important aspect of their teachings. And therefore they have taken various steps to preserve these texts or the 12 angas either through oral transmission and later to written manuscripts. And therefore, in a way, they have also ensured the continuation of the teachings of Mahavira. So therefore, the 12 angas are very important for them, form a main part of their teaching, and therefore they have taken various steps in order to preserve it, and also through oral transmission and written and by writing, they have ensured their continuation over the centuries. Then we have the Digambara sect, which in a way does not recognize, okay, it does not recognize these 12 angas to be authoritative, okay, and they believe that the original texts were lost soon after Mahavira's liberation. And therefore they say that only fragments or interpretations are available. So in the sense, fragments means, suppose you have a big text, okay, over the years, since it has kind of only few pieces of it are available, you don't have the complete set, okay, so only parts of it are available, so therefore the complete text is not available. Why? Because they think that the original text is lost, complete text, only a few parts or pieces here and there are available, and therefore they say that the other things are interpretations made by some later authors. So instead of this, they have their own set of canonical text. Okay, so these you have the Shatkan Dagama and the Kasaya Pahuda, which are again writings by later acharyas. So after these 12 main texts, you have certain subtexts which are there. And those subtexts are called as the Upangas. Okay, they are in a way the secondary text, as we will have a look at them. And these also deal with kind of their supplementary materials which give further elaboration or commentaries. Okay, so for example, now when in the future you all will have to prepare homilies, etc., you see people referring to certain commentaries, right? What are those commentaries? In other words, no, in a way, they are kind of a study done or interpretations by those biblical scholars, right? So they will take a look at each of the words, okay, in Greek, try to analyze it and try to give you a kind of a different meaning. So therefore, you see that there is not only one commentary, there are various commentaries which have a different style of approaching. Similarly, here we see that when we look at the Upangas, they also are kind of supplementary texts. So, in order to give a better understanding of the Angas, the Upangas kind of give you a kind of a commentary, or they give an additional context. Okay, so what may have been the actual context of the situation under which it was written. Also, you have certain extensions of the primary teachings. Okay, and in this way we see that these are done by scholars, okay, scholars and monks. So after going through the original Angas, if they realize that there was something that needed further clarification, something that needed further, to explain it in detail, they elaborated certain concepts, gave a bit of explanation to it, and in this way, these become a kind of a supplementary text for the Angas. Now, when we are dealing with the Upangas, it is said that there is a person by the name of Jambu Swami. Okay, he is considered to be an important figure in these Upangas, because it was during his time where these Upangas or these supplementary texts were completed. So now who is this Jambu Swami? He is the second direct successor of Mahavira. Okay, so now You will say, is he the 25th Tirthankara? The answer is no. Why? Because first and foremost we see that in Jain cosmology, time is divided into infinite cycles, okay, as we said last time, and each cycle has two halves. Now, which are those? You have the ascending time and the descending time. And therefore, each of these cycle is marked by the appearance of 24th Tirthankaras. Okay, so in the next cycle now, you will have another set of 24 Tirthankaras. So therefore, in this way, Jambu Swami is in a way the immediate disciple Okay, so and therefore he is in a way considered to be the last omniscient being of the current cycle. So it was his immediate disciple, that is, he succeeded Sudharma Swami, who was Mahavira's immediate successor. So he becomes the second successor, and during his period we see that these scriptures or these supplementary texts were completed. In fact, we see that both the 12 Angas and the 12 Upangas, all these 24 texts were in a way completed during his era. Okay, and therefore these have served as foundations for Jain teachings and practices over the generations. Now, why do you think that these compilations were important? Was it important for them to compile things together, keep things together? Why? Okay, one of the reason is to follow. Any other reason? Okay, to get a clarity, because as we have seen, there are different topics that are touched upon it. Next, consistency. Okay, so anything else? You also need to transmit knowledge, right, from one generation to another, and therefore we see that if there is something there, you can have some kind of consistency. So here we see that one of the reason or one of the significant factors was that you could now preserve the teachings of the Mahavira, and therefore these were in a way now preserved in a very systematic manner. And therefore, now we can say that the integrity of the doctrine or the importance of the doctrine was contained for a longer time. Then also we see that transmission of knowledge from one generation to another, and therefore they served as guides to the monks, nuns and lay persons. Okay, and they are also important for further development, which also give religious and cultural identity to the Jain community. Okay, so these are in a way the significant factors of these compilations. Now next you have something called as the scattered pieces or the painas. Okay, this all will be available, so no need to write here. Okay, so the PPTs will be already put up in fact. So the painas are the scattered pieces. Basically, in other words, these are kind of diverse texts on a wide variety of topics, and these are available both in prose as well as verse. Now, what is the difference between prose and verse? Prose is like a sentence, like na? Okay, where do we find prose generally? Novels, etc. Verse. What does verse have with it? Speciality of the verse is what? Rhyme, right? We find it in poems, etc. And you have words rhyming. Then also there is a certain scale, right? The count is there. So all these things are present in verse. So here we see that these painas are both composed as text, also as form of poetry or rhythmic text as well. Now we see that they deal with a wide range of subjects. Now which are these? You will have again cosmology, then you have rituals, then you have mythology, grammar, astrology, and much more. Now these also are considered to be supplementary texts, and these are meant to complement the angas and the upangas. And some of these painas which are there, they also have historical material, okay, right from the early teachings, and they in a way help to offer insights about the early development of Jainism thought and practice. Now the Kalpa Sutra is again another text, and this is a significant text for the Shvetambara sect. Now it is said that the author of this Kalpa Sutra is Bhadra Bahu, and he is said to be the sixth head of the Jain community after Mahavira. Now, what are the contents of this Kalpa Sutra? So, first and foremost, it has details about the life of Mahavira. Okay, a kind of a narrative of his life, which is very important for the Jains. It also speaks about the lives of the precious Tirthankaras. Okay, so the 23 that were there before him. Now, towards the end, we'll take a look at how each of these Tirthankaras contributed in their own way and how Mahavira is finally said to have put things together. Next, also, you have certain monastic rules for the monks and the nuns about how they are supposed to guide the community as well as what things they should follow in the monastery, okay, or in their monastic community. And finally, the last that we need to deal with is the Mula Sutras. Okay, and out of these Mula Sutras, we see that the Uttara Dhyana Sutra is the most important and the prominent one. Now, this again has very important aspects dealing with ethics as well as certain practical aspects of Jain philosophy. Okay, it is widely known in the West, and therefore once again it is partly poetic, partly prose. So it has again narratives, dialogues, and discourses. Now, what are the contents, you may ask? So, first is sermons and proverbs. Sermons which give deep insight into the teachings, into the practices, and these sermons are meant to instruct and inspire lay people and the monks and the nuns. And similarly, the proverbs also are another way of providing wisdom, like how we have in the Bible, right? You have the proverbs which also give a lot of wisdom through a very interesting manner. Then these also offer advice and counsel. Advice on how to live a life in accordance with the Jain principles, how to be disciplined, okay, what are the important moral rules that you are supposed to follow. And this advice and counsel is both for the lay people as well as for the monks and nuns. Okay, for the nuns, it would be more about what ascetic practices they need to follow, and what spiritual discipline is required. So they also contain certain parables as well as narratives or dialogues. So last time we had the question, right? We speak of Mahavira as the 24th Tirthankara, okay? And he is considered to be like the founder of Jainism. What about the other 23? Okay, he compiled, that is there. So what do you think? The other 23 that came before him, did they have any significance, or why are they called? Okay, what we can do is now we can take a look at each of these 23 Tirthankaras. Okay, so first one was Rasapadeva, as you all know, and he basically established the spiritual as well as the ethical foundations of Jainism. So he is the one who introduced concepts such as non-violence, truth, and other ethical principles. Next you have the Ajitanatha. The second one, he continued the teachings on non-violence and ethical conduct. Then you have Sambhava Natha, who is the third Tirthankara, and he contributed by giving emphasis on meditation and self discipline. Then you have Abhinandanatha, who taught about detachment from material possessions. Then fifth, Sumatinatha, he emphasized the importance of knowledge and wisdom. Then you have Padma Prabha. He is known for his teachings on purity and spiritual practices. Then you have the seventh one, Suprashvanatha, who was known for his principles on forgiveness and tolerance. Then eighth one was Chandraprabha, who was known for his teachings on humility and simplicity. Then you have Pushpadanta, who is the ninth Tirthankara. He was known for his teachings on self-control and asceticism. Then Shitalanta, the 10th Tirthankara, highlighting compassion Then you have the 11th one, Shreyam Sanata. He was known for his teachings on peace and non-violence. The 12th one, Vasu Pujya, who was known for his teachings on charity and generosity. 13th one, Vimalanata, who was known for his teachings on purity of thought plus action. 14th, you had Anantanata, who emphasized the eternal nature of the soul as well as the path to liberation. 15th was Dharmanata, again emphasizing righteousness plus ethical living. Shantinata, the 16th Tirthankara, again known for teachings on peace plus non-violence. 17th was Kuntunata, known for teachings on discipline plus self-restraint. 18th was Aranata, again focusing on detachment. 19th, Malinata, inner purity. Then you have the Muni Suvranata, who was the 20th Tirthankara, who was known for truth, teaching about the value of truth and the pursuit of knowledge. Then Naminata, the 21st one, again speaking on compassion and benevolence. Neminata, the 22nd Tirthankara, again speaking on renunciation plus ascetic practices. The 23rd was Parshavnata, who is the predecessor to Mahavira, and he established the fourfold path, that is truth, non-violence, non-possession. Then chastity was added by Mahavira. Okay? Non-stealing. Good. So we see that it was Mahavira who in a way compiled all these things together. He systematized the teachings. He revitalized the religion by putting together everything what the previous Tirthankaras had done, and he added the fifth vow of chastity. That is why he is considered to be the founder of the Jain religion. Okay, so thank you, and next time we'll deal with some questions and move to the concept of God and soul. So today we'll begin by taking a look at some of the questions which we dealt in the last class. So first, given that the canon was compiled much later than Mahavira's life, how might the process of the compilation and the historical context have influenced the final form of the text? So basically, we know that the final compilation took place much later, right? So what was the council where it took place? At which council were the texts compiled? Okay, Council of Vallabhi. So now, could there have been any biases or changes introduced during the process? Now we need to know that it took place many years after, okay, the teachings of Mahavira. So do you think, okay, so think for a little bit. Do you think that there must have been some changes or some biases in the process? Okay, yes, then why? No, then why? Okay, and if, what changes do you think? So first and foremost, you need to keep in mind that this happened something in the late 5th or 6th century. Okay, so also during this time you would see that there would be religious, social, political changes. So in spite of all this, so first and foremost, what do you understand by the process of compilation? What happened during this council exactly? Okay, so in other words, we see that we already know that oral teachings are put into written form. So now the question is, do you think any biases would have come in? Okay, and if, what biases could have come in? So first and foremost, can we say that priority, that means which text is to be included, okay, or which text is to be preserved over others, or which text has more importance than the others? Definitely everything may not have been put in written form. There may have been something where they had to pick and choose. So also at this time, since there were a lot of changes that were happening, one can also see that certain texts would have been in a way written or put in written form to address the contemporary issues. Okay, then the sects, do both the sects follow the same kind of scriptures? Do both the sects, which are the two sects? Shvetambara then Digambaras. Do both sects follow the same scriptures, or is there some difference? What is it? So in that case, can we say that also one of the biases could be the sectarian differences? Okay, that means certain texts would have been selected or emphasized because of their philosophical or theological importance. Next, we also see that there may have been certain modifications or omissions which also can reflect the interest of those who are compiling. So that means rather than putting the same original text, adjusting it to the context may also have happened. So these are the possibilities that we can reflect upon. So we have an event that took place, and then we can also say that based on certain things, certain biases, certain changes could have been introduced in the process. Okay, anything do you all want to add to this? Last class we dealt with, right? So what do they believe in? The other sects? So when we looked at the sacred scriptures, we said that the Digambara sect, okay, does not recognize the 12 Angas. Okay, now they believe that the original texts were lost after the death of Mahavira. Okay, instead they have their own set of canonical texts, such as there is also something called as the Shat Khandagama, okay, and the Kasaya Puda. So these are written by later scholars, so they follow those. Whereas when we look at the Shvetambara tradition, we see that they are the ones who follow the 12 Angas and believe that they are the most authoritative text. Okay, so now if there are nothing more to add to this, who they have kind of text. Yeah, but they follow them as authoritative text. Okay, in that sense. So next we can take a look how might the evolution of the text from oral to written form impact the interpretation and understanding. Okay, and what challenges do you think the scholars face in studying these texts that have been passed through the ages? So again, it is connected with the previous question. So what challenges do you think that the scholars